I do want to introduce Lynn Stoddard from Sustainable CT. Lynn was introduced to us by another co-conspirator, Heather Burns. And we got talking a few weeks ago about some of the programs that they're working on around sustainability across the state. So I'm really excited to have Lynn and a very late arrival, Bob Wall, who's been a very sort of active practitioner in putting some of these programs to place in the Fairfield market. So apologies, Bob, that you weren't included on this, but we'll get you next time. So just wanted to pass it over to Lynn.
Sure. Thanks, Glenn. Hi, everyone. Lynn Stoddard, happy to be here today. Thanks for your interest in Sustainable CT. I'm going to give you just an overview of our program, and then we can be informal and head where you'd like to go with questions and information. So Sustainable CT, it's a program that inspires, supports, and celebrates sustainability in Connecticut towns and cities. And I'm going to showcase some of the basics of our program through our website. You should be able to see the site now. So how do we do that? How do we inspire and support sustainable action in our communities? The first, we have three main ways of doing that. One is we have a list of best practices and actions for towns to take to help them become more sustainable. And as you can see from this list, these are our categories. We define sustainability very broadly. Most people think of just environmental sustainability. Your group, of course, thinks beyond that, as we do. So it means everything that makes a town a great place to live and work. You think about examples of places you visited that are phenomenally thriving and alive. They contain these things. They have thriving local economies. They have well-stewarded land and natural resources, arts and culture, forward-thinking planning by the town, clean and many transportation and mobility options, and so on. It includes healthy and diverse housing, and we have a strong foundation in equity. So the communities that feel vibrant and are healthy are those that are inclusive and everyone feels like they belong and can become part of creating what that community becomes. So here's the broad outline, these categories, and just to give you an idea, each one of those, when you click down, has a list of actions that we kind of give a outline of how to do the action, in this case, sustainable purchasing, what a town has to submit to achieve points, and then some success stories and resources available in Connecticut to help towns do that. So for every action, which are over 55 on this broad list, we have these best practices and really trying to showcase peer learning. So I'll show you in a little while how we do that, how towns can kind of post what they're doing and other towns learn from that. So aside from this roadmap of best practices, we also have tools and support to help towns implement those actions. And some of those main tools are, we have a group of fellows. So this summer we have 13 students from colleges all over Connecticut who are working virtually this year, but kind of embedded with the 9 regional planning agencies in Connecticut. So those are the Council of Governments. And they're hands-on with the towns, helping them be aware of resources we have, upload materials for certification, and so on. So they've put in thousands of hours of work in helping towns navigate some of these best practices and actions and submit for certification. We have funding. I'm going to talk at the end a little bit more about how we invest in sustainability projects in communities, which is kind of an innovative program that we created last year. Lots of technical support from many partners that help the towns and provide free technical expertise and advice, including, I mentioned equity as a foundational piece of our program. We have many tools to help towns basically embrace diversity, look at who lives within their communities, who doesn't, and change the way municipal decisions and practices are made as a result of understanding and becoming more inclusive. And that also includes free consultation from 8 equity coaches that we have on contract. And basically we assign these coaches to towns to work one-on-one with them to help them understand how they can become more inclusive and address racial and other inequities in their communities. So we've got the roadmap of actions. We've got this support through technical assistance from partners, our own equity coaches, our own fellows. And then the big part of the program is recognizing the great things towns have done, which we do through our certification program. So this map shows a familiar map of Connecticut. You can see we have over, we have 110 of our 169 communities that are registered. So every dot on here is one of our towns that's registered and participating in the program, which is free for towns. 48 which are currently certified. You can see some of those are at the bronze level and some at the silver level. Collectively, they've completed over 1,500 of these actions that we just looked at and successfully documented those. So the really cool thing about this map, and I mentioned peer sharing, is that we showcase what towns are doing so others can learn from them. So since we've got Bob here, I'm just gonna pull up the Fairfield dot here. Fairfield was certified, one of our first certified communities at the silver level, which is our highest level currently, in October of 2018. And if you want to know what Fairfield did, you basically can see every action that they got points for and read how they did it. So we could click on these links and see the documentation. They might be a plan or photos that show what they did to support local businesses, for example, and any of these actions. So that's a really cool feature of our website, that showcasing what the towns have done and the peer sharing. The towns get recognized with plaques that they can put on their town hall. We do a recognition ceremony every year at the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities annual conference. So they're up on the stage, the mayors, in front of all of their peers, which is really exciting. So I will mention as well in this little overview that our program is completely independently funded. It's supported by a number of philanthropic foundations. Our founding funders are 3 family foundations in Connecticut: the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation, the Common Sense Fund, and the Hampshire Foundation. In addition, we have a bunch of community foundations supporting this work in our communities. It's run by the Institute for Sustainable Energy. I'm the executive director there, which is based at Eastern Connecticut State University. And so again, we're all grant funded to run this program, and was developed through about 1.5 years of stakeholder work that included representatives from every town throughout Connecticut in giving us input on what this list of actions should be and how the certification program should be designed. So a little bit more quickly about certification. We saw these categories. A town has to do 1 action in each of these categories. So they need to show a breadth of understanding and commitment to this broad definition and comprehensive definition of sustainability. They also have to reach a point threshold. So they need to get 200 points to be bronze and 400 to be silver. So they kind of choose which actions resonate with them, where there's passion and energy, in their town and commitment to accomplish them. So it's built with flexibility, but it's kind of some broad guidelines and rigor in what certification actually means. Should I pause for any questions, Glenn, or?
I'm just wondering what gold is going to look like.
Yeah, well, we are doing a lot of thinking about gold right now. We're imagining it's going to be obviously a higher threshold of points. We will probably also play with some requirements around you can only get a certain amount of credit for actions you've taken in the past, and you have to demonstrate new action within the past year on a certain amount of things. Right now, we're very generous in giving credit for past action to towns because they've been doing great things. So we might demand a little bit more of the new stuff for the gold level. We'd like to mix in some more actions that actually are based on performance metrics. So right now, some of the actions are things like, implement a sustainable purchasing policy. So that's a plan, a document, outreach, and whatnot. Other things actually have performance metrics associated with them. So if we look in the energy ones, in order to get points for reducing energy across all municipal buildings, towns have to submit data on all their municipal buildings and the change in energy consumption from a baseline. So gold may include more of these performance-based actions, so we can, kind of quantify a lot of these things and how collectively all the towns in Connecticut that are participating in Sustainable CT are moving the state towards a lot of these state goals we have in greenhouse gas reductions, open space preservation, materials management and recycling, and so on. But yeah, we're also open to ideas on gold. We'll probably ratchet up what they have to do on equity. Right now, for each town has to demonstrate some progress on optimizing for equity in another municipal decision or action. For bronze, you have to show this in one example, and for silver for 3. Obviously, it'll be more than that for gold, and there may be some other elements of kind of illustrating a commitment and movement on towards more inclusive communities. But we are open to ideas on how gold will look, and it'll probably be coming next year.
It would be cool if there's a way to borrow good ideas from other towns using this website and getting extra points if you've discovered something another town is doing and figuring out a way to implement it, since sustainability, is not all, so that everybody isn't relying on themselves to invent the wheel.
I love that idea. And yes, I think one of the things we do want to inspire is multi-town collaboration and towns mentoring to each other. So we've been playing with some ideas around that in our funding program, our community match fund. Towns get more points if they've worked with another town than if they did the project alone. I think we can get more creative than that in this, but yeah, I love that idea.
Thanks, Lynn. There's 2 questions that have come in through the chat. It would now be a good time to mention them, or
Sure.
do you want to wait? Okay. One is, are there site visits involved? Do you physically go to the towns to see implementation? And related to the UN climate change goals, does your framework have any relationship specifically with that?
Yeah, so the first question around site visits, that is not part of certification. We have a really small team at Eastern running this program. So certification is, we rely on, there's actually an interactive dashboard embedded in this website. Each town gets their own user access and can automatically upload stuff in this platform. So we do that, you know, we have a panel of expert reviewers in other organizations, over 30 organizations that review all these submissions. It does, unfortunately, we don't have the time for site visits, although we do have a strong kind of face-to-face presence through our fellows that are embedded throughout the regions in assistance, and the equity coaches and our staff going out to town council meetings and whatnot on the support end. The UN sustainability goals, yes, I would say certainly we're aligned in many aspects, and there's overlap. We looked more to the state of Connecticut's goals related to sustainability in terms of direct alignment and how our towns, things within the town's jurisdiction and authority can actually move the needle on some of these goals for the state.
Thank you. Gavin, do you want to speak as a manufacturer here with your question about retrofitting wastewater treatment? I'm going to turn it over to our president, Gavin Watson.
Sure. So yeah, I just, one of the things that I saw recently with the Connecticut Sustainable Business Council stuff that we were working with, it was a using organic waste to generate methane to provide electricity. And I think that there's one town in Connecticut, I can't remember which one, Southington or something like that, that's currently doing something like that. And so I followed into the company that made that, that was doing that, and their parent, and the company that built the systems for them. And it looked like they were building, it's a German company that they were building systems to capture methane from wastewater treatment plants. Of course, methane is, much worse than carbon dioxide from a greenhouse gas point of view. And they were capturing the methane, and then they were using it through micro turbines or small gas powered engines to generate electricity to run the pumps and the aerators at the wastewater treatment plant. I was just wondering if there's any towns in Connecticut that have gone that far, done anything like that.
I think our friend in Fairfield has some examples in that, Bob. Aren't you guys capturing methane from your treatment plant?
Yes, we are. I'm trying to remember the current status because we've been doing it for a long time, originally with micro turbines.
Oh, cool.
And those had to be replaced, but I know that they are using it somehow to take energy from the waste and use it for a composting facility to accelerate the process. But they're also involved in a lot of activities to kind of bring it forward. I think it's been about 50 years since the last major upgrade, so a lot of the equipment needs to be made more efficient. And at the same time, I think they have enough renewable energy systems there to make it carbon neutral, which is, I think, one of the first towns in the state to achieve that distinction for that complex.
For the wastewater complex or whatever.
It's the wastewater complex and transfer station and a number of other facilities on the same campus.
Okay. Yeah, that's really neat, because I'm not familiar with what happens in Ridgefield, which is where I live, but I worked in West Haven, and I'm familiar with the West Haven treatment plant, and they put a Doosan fuel cell in there a couple of years ago, and they're using a waste heat.
We have one of those too.
What's that?
We have one of those too.
Yeah, one of those too. Okay. Yeah, so they're using a waste heat from that for their in their system and everything, but that, the thought and I ran across this other thing. I was like, yeah, if we could use the methane though and run it through either a fuel cell or reciprocating engine or like micro turbines or something like that and generate electricity, that, that'd be pretty cool. So solve lots of problems all at the same time. And that's the sort of thing where it just seemed to me like, okay, you know, all of these towns have a wastewater treatment plant, or maybe they share one, but once something was come up, you know, somebody came up with a thing, you could almost just cookie cutter it, you know, right across the whole state.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the hope, in kind of ratcheting up these best practices over time so they really are state of the art. We do have, if we haven't kind of caught the imagination of everything a town might do, we do have an innovation action. So submit something you're doing that's cool, that you should be recognized for, and then other towns can learn from that too. And sometimes we bring those innovation actions into the real action list when we notice a couple towns are doing them.
Yeah, that kind of relates to a question that Paul just dropped in the chat about ROI. If there's any sort of score, state scoring, like if you were to, a town was to able to convert from halogen to LED lights, you know, would that be reflected in any, you know, reduction of power consumption or point scoring system?
Yeah, so we've designed it to basically give points for your overall energy consumption or your overall renewables, change in renewable energy use, or your overall waste reduction, not specific points related to technology, specific technologies or specific projects. But again, if there's something, so yeah, if you're doing an overall replacement of LEDs, you're going to see a drop in your energy use in town, and you'll get points under that action if you can provide the data to demonstrate it. The technology specific things could fall in the innovation action, especially if they're kind of new and forthcoming. But a lot of the technical support we provide with our partners is helping towns be aware of the incentive programs available through the Connecticut Energy Efficiency Fund, managed by our utilities and whatnot. So lighting replacements and that kind of thing.
So Bob, as a practitioner, you know, you've been involved in putting some of these projects into effect in the Fairfield. Do you want to talk a little bit about that as an experience, and what benefits, what challenges you've seen, whatever? Just talk to us about how it works.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the pre-gathering, we originally had a clean energy task force, which was kind of focused on renewables and efficiency, and then subsequently snuck electric cars under the tent. And then in 2017, our mission expanded to include sustainability more broadly along the environmental spectrum. So picture the Wizard of Oz when Dorothy opened the door and things went from black and white into color. Well, when Sustainable CT program came along, it was like putting on the 3D glasses and looking out into the color world, because as Lynn described, this program went well beyond the traditional environmental subject matters, touching upon a lot of economic and equity and housing issues that are things that we you know, some of us were familiar with, but it had never been part of our mission. So we were very excited to become involved, and it only took about 6 months to get the town to sign off formally through a resolution from our representative town meeting. But once we had done that, we had the strong, enthusiastic support of our first selectman, and I think this is testament to the program establishing a relationship with the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, because all the town leaders were familiar with that entity, and they'd all been invited to the annual conference, and they usually all attend that. And at that initial conference where the program was launched, they invited the mayor from Woodbridge, New Jersey, which is where the program originated, or at least their version of the program originated. And after listening to the mayor talk about all the benefits that Woodbridge, New Jersey achieved as a result of its participation in their program and achieving the highest point totals, our first selectman was, you know, all in on this program. There was, however, one big catch. He told us that you know, as much as he supported the program, he couldn't ask any of his staff to be the lead bus drivers, as he described it. So my colleague Mary Hogue and I became bus drivers on the spot. And it was kind of cool because it gave us a little badge, and we were allowed to integrate with the town departments that were actually doing a lot of this work or would be asked to do the work. And it was kind of like a marathon. We were very excited, but we realized there was a lot to cover here. I don't know, was it 55 actions originally, Lynn, something like that? So we spent a lot of time looking at it and trying to figure out which department had some responsibility for a given action and put a name to that. And we set out, emails, phone calls, knocking on doors, and spent a good 6 months just methodically working our way through. Many of the items were ones that the town had already undertaken and in some cases completed. So we had to do the documentation to support that in our submission. Other ones were in progress, and in some cases we were able to complete it by the August deadline, and other ones are still ongoing. So it's been fun, it's been challenging, and extremely rewarding. And as I've said to other towns that have been asking for assistance, and how do you go about cracking this giant nut? Lynn mentioned there's a toolkit there, and you just tell them you got to open the toolkit. You have the fellows. We had one located in Bridgeport, which is our local council of government nearby, and worked with her quite closely. We took advantage of workshops and webinars, the equity coaches, and within the toolkit, there are lots of best practices. So somebody earlier mentioned, if another town had done something successful, it's right in the toolkit. So you can look to that and oftentimes contact the party that was responsible or knowledgeable about it. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel all by yourself. There's a lot of help in there, and we're still working on it. And I think just the news of 2020 has been fascinating, how it kind of dovetails with a lot of the work we started to do when you talk about disaster preparedness. We've got this global pandemic, which is impacting Connecticut. We just had a hurricane that caused a blackout. So there was a lot of information in there about preparedness, particularly as a coastal community. We're very vulnerable. The Black Lives Matter movement, just suddenly exploded, even though it had been there for all of our lifetimes, but now it really captured everyone's attention. So I think it provided the platform to implement a lot of the equity measures, or at least start thinking about and talking about and broadening the discussion groups within the community. So it's really been a wonderful synergy with everything that's going on. As horrifying as a lot of the news is, I think this has been helpful in how towns can survive and thrive under these conditions.
So what does success look like then? I'm looking at this utopian sort of picture and wondering, when the mayor of that town in Woodbridge, or in New Jersey, painted the picture of the virtues of becoming such. What did he identify as successes, and have you been able to achieve any of those within the Fairfield, apart from your certification?
Yeah, I think the mayor of Woodbridge was particularly focused on the benefits to attract and retain businesses as a successful green community. And that resonated deeply with our economic and community development director. And he was already on board with that. But just in the last few years, we've seen a lot of businesses come into town that have some sustainability element to their business model. We've got a company that does bike repairs, not only in their shop, but anywhere on the roads. And there are, there's a store called BD Provisions, which is now providing the containers and other materials, so you don't need to use as much plastic for shopping and things like that. So it's already happening, but I think, it's always a work in progress, and you have setbacks as we have, unfortunately this year. And I think that has also distracted a lot of people's attentions away from working on these actions. But, we intend to keep pressing on. And you and I discussed earlier that solid waste practices is something that is critically important in Connecticut. And that was something that we jumped on right away, but we also realized it would be a longer term action because, in our town of Fairfield, we have about 11 private haulers and a very entrenched system. And we were trying to radically revise that. But, the carrot, if you will, is that this is being done all throughout New England. Connecticut is really the outlier here, and it's being done all throughout other parts of America and the world, and it's been successful pretty much everywhere it's been implemented, the pay-as-you-throw system. So that's something we're working on. It's taking a little longer than other actions, but it's a goal that we hope to achieve within the next year, hopefully.
Eleanor, you and I have been talking offline about work that your town's doing. Is there anything you want to jump in at this point?
No, I earlier when Bob was talking about the equity pieces, it's a wonderful resource that Connecticut Sustainable CT offers. Once a town gets certification, different officials, or I simply sit on the board of my economic development commission, so I was eligible to take the Equity 101 series that you offered, and flipped very gracefully to a virtual format in June. So that's a wonderful thing, and I think people don't necessarily connect all of those dots that you mentioned as falling under the umbrella of sustainability. And it's interesting, there's a mindset, we ran into it this morning on a different meeting. It's like when you bring up sustainability, people say, oh, that's like long-term stuff. I don't have time to think about that. I'm just trying to survive. When actually, if you're sustainable, survivability is that much easier, right? Because you're like closer to the ground, reusing things, not wasting things. So it's such an interesting mindset shift. I wonder if you have any talking points about helping that click for people. That sustainability is a now thing that's going to help with whatever disasters you're facing.
Well, yeah, and I'd just say too, the whole sense of urgency. It's like you can't just say, oh, next decade, I'll get around to it. It's like we're running out of decades. Can't just keep pushing it off. I was doing stuff back in the 70s and the 80s, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's still taking forever. We're not going, it's like so slow. So yeah, for people who've been involved in it for a long time, it's exhausting, and just the rate of change and the pace and everything. Somehow we got to bubble up that sense of urgency. It's like, we got to get this done like now, and it's not like one of those things you can push off. It's like, it's human survival is going to depend on what we do in the next few years. So,
and that whatever people are dealing with, it seems like such a now burning urgent issue. Sustainability is going to help with that.
Yes.
It's not going to compete. Exactly. I don't know. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in on kind of these themes of what does success look like, and share just one other thing that is pretty cool about our program. So last September, we launched the Community Match Fund. And we didn't want a traditional municipal grants program where the mayor or the economic development director decides what needs to happen in our city or town. Instead, we went to the people, the residents, community-based organizations, and said, what's your vision for your community, and how can we help lift that and make it a reality? Who's got a great idea that aligns with our platform, which is very broad? So we teamed with a crowdfunding platform concept, and essentially said to people, who's got a great idea for your town, what needs to happen, and train them in crowdfunding, put them on our platform here, and then we match every dollar for dollar. So you can see we've got a lot of projects. We've invested between the crowdfunding and the match over $740,000 in the first 10 months. And these are the types, you know, these are the thumbnails of the types of projects happening around the state. This is our round 2, so we have 9 projects, I think, running right now since the beginning of July. And we have over 50 that are in our round 1 on another page. But essentially, you know, people in Hartford that are, I mean, this is kind of COVID related too. They're saying, how do we make outdoor seating for our small businesses that's going to work in this time so people can gather and we still can connect. There's obviously lots of things on the environmental sustainability front with pollinators and tree plantings and whatnot. A lot of work around food equity, and we've seen a lot of community gardens, but we've seen some really cool innovations on that where, for example, in New Haven, a group called Love Fed is going into their neighborhoods and knocking on their neighbor's door and saying, we want to help you grow food in your own where you live, and putting 100 raised beds into low-income New Haven residents' yards, putting in the raised beds, teaching people how to grow food, running cooking workshops, culinary workshops on how to use the food, and being there with them to kind of help them learn that. Obviously, we've got some job training projects, some arts and culture. So really exciting stuff around this. And when I think about, you know, what does success look like? It looks like these pictures of these people in our communities, changing them in ways that they feel are really important, and validating that by matching their dollars that 100 of their neighbors and fellow residents in town have also supported, and local businesses with small pledges to help bring these visions to reality. So I think it's about belonging. Most of all, if we have communities where people feel a sense of belonging and connection, we know they're more resilient in a storm because you know who's vulnerable on your street, who's elderly, who doesn't have a car, and you're going to check in on them. The belonging breeds this, hey, someone wants to build a pollinator garden. I've always wanted to do that. Like, let's work on that together. And this is part of how we co-create what we want our town to become. It's belonging in that we're looking beyond the usual people who are at the table and reaching out to different populations and making sure that they're included and giving voice to their dreams as well. And if we do that, and if we do it well, we'll get around some of the negative image stuff in Connecticut that once you retire, it's too expensive to live here. Once you graduate, you need to go somewhere else for a job. It's not an attractive place for millennials or Gen Z to settle because we don't have vibrant cities. If we really engage people meaningfully in creating the communities and the connections in communities that are important to them, I think we really will not just have made major gains on climate and resilience, but we'll have communities that people come here and say, this is cool. I think I want to stay here. I think I want to move here. And in fact, you know, some of the feedback we've gotten from mayors about the value of the program, as Bob was saying, it's a platform and a framework where you have an easy map for how resident volunteers can work in collaboration with town staff towards mutual goals. I live in the town of Mansfield. We have 40 different committees: economic development, ag, solid waste, sustainability, blah, blah, blah. It's a nightmare for the staff to manage. And a town like that says, hey, like, we're all working within this framework. There's a place for the ag people. There's a place for the economic development people. built out in Sustainable CT. If it's not there, they can do it through the innovation portion. And it really has, the mayors have said, you know, I didn't really realize that was going to happen, but it's really helped make our staff and our residents connect more on working together, make that more efficient, make that more kind of goal driven, so we know where we're driving towards and we can see the difference that we've made. The mayors are also proud that they have boasting rights. You know, Fairfield, I think, was hell-bent on being the town, not only the first, one of the first, but with the highest points. And Mary and Bob and the team were very impressively successful on that. And then they have this audit, essentially. We click on the dot in Fairfield, and the mayor can say, now I'm not just telling you I'm green, here's an inventory, here's our audit for the public of everything we've done. Come move to Fairfield. We don't just have great schools and great places to work and we're close to New York. We're certified silver, you know, sustainable CT silver. So yeah, success looks like a lot of things.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat about what you expect or what towns can benefit from by putting the branding, the Sustainable CT digital branding on their website, and you know, how do you sort of manage the cross branding?
Yeah, so our logo is this map of the state of, this is our logo here, the state of Connecticut with these dots and ripples, showing the ripple effect that one little thing spreads out to others and we influence others and learn from each other. And it's the greatest impact of many people doing little things. We have a version of our logo with the certified silver stamp on it and one with the bronze. And yeah, I have a logo use agreement and whatnot. So when towns become certified, they have rights to use that logo. They post it on their website. Some of them like put it on, you know, giveaway stuff like reusable shopping bags and things like that. So yeah, we do share our logo and the co-branding that way. We've seen a lot of towns that have created, well, Bob mentioned Sustainable Fairfield County, which is an initiative of multiple towns sharing events and things related to this and doing them collaboratively. We have a lot of towns that have just created their Sustainable CT page on their website, which also repeats kind of everything they've done and some of the branding and messaging and an opportunity to interact with residents and local businesses around that.
Are there any things like that in other states? Like, is this modeled on a existing platform in other states or other countries?
Yeah, Bob mentioned that we invited our friends from Sustainable Jersey and the mayor of Woodbridge, New Jersey, to come speak at the launch of our program. When we were looking into this, what would work for Connecticut, there were maybe 10 similar programs in other states, but all homegrown and slightly different. We looked very closely at those. We partnered with CCM, the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, gathered mayors together and said, hey, look what other states are doing. Here are some of the most successful, impactful programs. What makes sense for Connecticut? We drew a lot from Sustainable Jersey and others. So we've learned that way, and we formed a Sustainable States Network. So there are 13 states now. Mass Green Communities, New York Climate Smart Communities, Sustainable Jersey, Sustainable CT, Florida Green Building Council has kind of like, theirs is building focused. So they're all different stripes and flavors and shapes, but we have a commonality that their programs based on change at the local government level, and they're statewide initiatives, and they have some level of certification and recognition. So we're going in together on multi-state grants, on data and metrics projects, on action development in going deeper on health equity and climate actions for towns, that we can explore opportunities together and then customize them for our state programs. Yeah, and so there's this ability to still have this homegrown, unique programs that, like, Connecticut's different, we need our own program. New Jersey's different, we need our own program. Enough commonality, though, that we can show the scaling of what local governments are doing in Connecticut and across these thousands of municipalities in these handfuls of states across the country that are, again, moving the needle and really making a difference on some of these broader goals that are so essential to our country, climate and equity and so many things.
Well, one of the cool things about, you know, there being like a sort of overarching kind of, you know, structure to it, but also all the towns kind of doing their own version of it, is you're really, you know, running all kinds of different experiments all at the same time.
Yes.
So, which is much better for learning and iterating and getting ideas and things like that. Because, you know, if everybody had to do the same thing the same way, you know, in the same order, you know, nobody would be learning anything. But with everybody doing all these things all a little bit differently and learning from each other, it makes for much better ideas.
Yeah. And we were the beneficiaries of Sustainable Jersey having been in place for like 7 years, and some of the other programs as well. So we just kind of were able to pick and choose and copy, and then none of them had an equity component built into their program. We built ours in from the start. Now they're like learning from us and adapting it to their programs that have been around longer. So you're exactly right.
Yeah.
It's great learning for them.
What are the next cool projects for Fairfield?
Well, we're working on some of the ones that were too big a lift to accomplish in 2018, but they've proven to be very long arching projects. I mentioned the pay-as-you-throw for the waste removal. But I think one of the key opportunities here is finding actions that can help save the town money. And if you can position it in such a way, it's difficult for the town leaders to say no, because they're always looking for ways to, you know, help the town budget. And an interesting anecdote along the way is we spent a lot of time analyzing the differences between conventional automobiles and electric cars, doing a very detailed cost comparison. And we finally got to the point where we thought we had made the case that EVs were actually cheaper for the town to invest in. Previously, they'd been inheriting these used Crown Vics from the police department that got about 6 miles per gallon.
Yep.
And so we finally had proven our case, and the chief administrative officer said, why do we even need a town fleet? So at this point, it looks like we'll be getting rid of town cars, but they seem to have opened their eyes to you know, the opportunities with the EVs. But another big project that we've been working on, and again, it's long-term, is the plan of conservation and development, which is required for all towns to update every 10 years. And this is a real biggie, and we're trying to embed sustainability in every facet possible. And for better or worse, the process has been delayed, and this year it's been delayed again because of the difficulty in holding public hearings on it. So we're hoping by next year that they will have a new version of that, and it will be full of all the best practices that Lynn and her colleagues have helped us to identify. And the last thing that we've been working on is an outgrowth of an action that was particularly close to me, and I'll confess that we copied a lot of the great ideas from Lynn's hometown of Mansfield in creating a web page to support locally grown foods. And we're trying to take that to another level by creating a food co-op. And this is a little daunting because you have a group of volunteers, all of them are completely overstretched on their bandwidth, but you're talking about creating a business in town, competing against existing businesses, but for a good cause. And it also, you know, has equity ramifications. So those are some of the big things that we're working on, but we'll roll up our sleeves and see what else we can do in the coming year.
Good answer. I'm just wondering, Lynn, if there is a federal version of this program, or is it baked into how they, I mean, because as a country, you know, we are 5% of the world's population, but we still consume 25% of the world's energy. So this country has a long way to go to reach the sustainability of, say, our European counterparts. So how do you feel about that as a challenge going forward?
Well, when we were looking into starting the program, EPA has something, I think it's called STAR communities, which is a certification program. A couple of reasons why it didn't resonate. One, everyone likes to say we're different, like that size doesn't really fit us. And so we got that. And the other thing is, a lot of this was about the process. If you look today at our action list and Sustainable Jersey's action list and Mass Green Communities, you'll see a lot of the same stuff. We could have lifted the EPA program or ours, plunked it up and said, hey, mayors, let's go for it. Instead, we spent 6 months with over 200 people sitting around tables in 9 working groups and said, what's important to you? The list came out similar to what other states have, but some differences, but it was about the process. By doing that, we created ownership, in co-ownership of the program in all these towns and organizations and stakeholder groups that contribute to creating this, the action list. And it really is a compilation of some of the great programs that are already existing: Green Bank, CPACE program, Solar for All, some of the housing programs through the Partnership for Strong Communities. We wove them together. So we took something that had a lot of great successful resources and programs for Connecticut towns around sustainability, wove it together through really strong partnerships, and integrated the programming and the support from these organizations so that towns would get points and had an extra incentive to kind of work on them and knit them together. And I mentioned, when we looked at the map, we have 110 communities that are registered. That's 65% of the towns in Connecticut, and we've only been launched less than three years ago. We're less than 3 years old. And those 110 towns and cities are 80% of the population. So that, and we weren't like out knocking on town hall doors. The people were ready as soon as we launched because they had created the program with us. And then they begin to hear about it from their peers and whatnot. So it really, truly is kind of like this, it takes a village, and it's owned by the village. We like to say Sustainable CT is 4 towns by towns. And that's kind of a testament to the level of engagement. 6 people sitting at Eastern Connecticut State University in Willimantic would not create this level of engagement by residents and mayors across the state. It's a program that's just co-owned by so many different organizations and towns.
Well, a huge congratulations to you on 3 years of runway to get that kind of adoption across the state is a heavy lift, and I've so enjoyed this conversation and input from Bob, and just, it's a small group today, but sometimes the best conversations happen in a small room, and really excited with not only what you've done, but where you can go with this. And the community matching fund is a great model of small initiatives, how they can boil up to stand for much bigger things. So I think those two, the examples you gave us today have been very helpful for us and our community at Conscious Capitalism to understand the value of your work. So I'm really grateful for your time, Bob and Lynn, and everyone in the room today. On that note, I will sign off and thank you all for coming today, and be well, and we'll see you this time next week.